There's a lot of buzz surrounding this Wolverines program. And where did that excitement, where did that buzz, where did that momentum really begin? Well, that's where I want to begin here when I'm talking about the Maize and Blue. It really began at the end of last season. I believe that those last two ball games, the Ohio State game and then the bowl game in Tampa against Alabama, winning those two games, hey, just like they did the year before, beating Ohio State at the end of the year and then beating Alabama in their bowl game. I think considering what that 2024 season was and maybe kind of how down that this Michigan program was, to be able to finish the way they did and have an 8-5 season, I think was so huge for the future of this program and for the future of a Sharon Moore-led Michigan football program. Like, if you lose to Ohio State, you end up going 6-6. You may be playing a nothing bowl game. Maybe you're in something like the Pinstripe Bowl instead of Nebraska, and you're playing Boston College in a muddy mess, and you win the game. Okay, big deal. But being able to have that momentum where you're able to knock off these blue blood caliber programs, and then you lead it, flipping Bryce Underwood, having the 6th ranked recruiting class coming in as freshmen here in 2025. There may be no program, not only in the Big Ten Conference, but there may be no program in all of college football that has more momentum when you look into the end of the season. And then when you look at recruiting and transfer portal and everything that's going on with Michigan football, there may be no team that is on a bigger roll than the Michigan Wolverines going into the 2025 season. Now, there are 3 S's when you look at why this Michigan program, I think, could be primed for a return to the college football playoffs. It's about smash, it's about strength, and it's about schedule. Let's start first with Sharon Moore's favorite, that smash mentality that exists in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Now, they're bringing in an offensive coordinator and maybe some quarterbacks that are maybe more used to playing in some spread type of concepts. But don't let that fool you. As long as Michigan is wearing a winged helmet, as long as they're packing in 100,000 into the big house, this is still going to be a run-first football team. I do think that this Michigan offense is going to be more dynamic, and that's going to help out everybody certainly involved. But when I look at the run game for Michigan, you have got another great duo in the backfield right there. First, you got to talk about Justice Haynes. The Big Ten Conference was able to go out and get the top 2 running backs in the transfer portal. Of course, Mekhi Hughes transferring into Oregon was number 1, and Justice Haynes transferring from Alabama is number 2. Michigan, over these Big Ten championship seasons and, of course, that national championship season, and even last year, always have had a great running back duo. You go back to Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum. Blake Corum combined with Donovan Edwards, and then this last year, Donovan Edwards, although he had a little bit of a down year considering the expectations, but you saw Khalil Mullins was nearly a 1,000-yard rusher as well. The tandem starts with Justice Haynes. I mean, coming out, he was a 5-star recruit, top 20 guy in the nation. He was on the 24/7 Sports All Freaks list, this kind of guy. And he was kind of, when he was in that Alabama run system, Jam Miller was in that system, and there were certainly a good amount of guys, but Justice Haynes now is going to be the guy, and I think he fits more into the north and south type of run scheme that Michigan is going to have, maybe compared to what they were doing over at Alabama. Kalen DeBoer and now Ryan Grubb is going to be coming in there as the offensive coordinator, so I think it fits all parties best. And then a guy Michigan fans are really excited about, you saw him really flash in the bowl game, is Jordan Marshall, a high 4-star recruit. He was a true freshman this last season. Former Mr. Football in the state of Ohio by Jordan Marshall. I think that this is a great combination. I think that this is going to be, there's a lot of great running back 1-2 duos in the Big Ten next season. Penn State's got one, Oregon's got one, Michigan will certainly have one as well. So this is going to be an offense with much better quarterback play. I think they're improving out on the perimeter as well, but don't let it fool you. This Michigan football program, as long as Sharon Moore is the head coach, this is a team that is going to smash. This is a team that is going to be able to run the football. And I think having better quarterback play, having a better threat in terms of the pass game, I think is only going to help the matchups inside the box in those types of run situations where there are less players in the box as well, so they can take advantage of those hat-on-a-hat matchups that Michigan certainly loves to do as well. Running the football, smash, is one of Michigan's strengths, obviously. And Michigan is going to continue to play into their strengths. Running the football and playing great defense. Now, this defense is going to have a lot of players drafted from it last season. Will Johnson and Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. Like, there's a lot of really good players, despite maybe the record from last season. There's going to be a lot of Michigan representation in the upcoming NFL draft in Green Bay. But I still look at this defense as a big-time strength. Run the football, play great defense. It's Michigan football, baby. You love to see it. It's classic Big Ten football. When I look at this Michigan defense and the strength that they have, and look, what does it say about the Wolverines program as a whole? When you can lose Mason Graham, when you can lose Kenneth Grant, when you can lose your leading sack guy in Josiah Stewart on defensive line, and you have folks like me saying this is still going to be a really good defensive line. It means Michigan is able to recruit. It means Michigan is able to retain. That might be the most important of them all. And Michigan is able to develop, I think, better than anybody, certainly up front of the defense. TJ Guy and Derek Moore are going to be returning off the edge. They combined for 9.5 sacks last season. You also have a Cameron Brandt who's sitting there around like 265 pounds. I think he can play a few positions on the defensive line. Certainly he had 3 sacks last season. So I think the pressure is certainly going to be there. There's going to be a lot of options in them from a pass rushing standpoint to be able to wreak havoc in the backfield. And then the defensive line is deep. This has been kind of the MO with Jesse Minter defenses at Michigan, and now with Wink Martindale. They like to rotate bodies in and out and stay fresh up front of the defensive line. I think that's been a big key to the Wolverines' success, certainly over the years. Now, here's the deal. Michigan might have had the best defensive tackle combination maybe in my lifetime that I've seen. If you've seen one better, please leave it in the comments below. But it's going to be pretty damn good. So it's not going to be elite. But I think that this Michigan defensive line in the interior is still going to be really good to great. Rayshawn Benny is in there. Transfer from Alabama, Damon Payne. He's a former 5-star. He's expected to be a plug-and-play guy, certainly up front. Trey Williams is another transfer coming over from Clemson as well. A lot of bodies, a lot of depth up front here. I really like what Michigan has on the defensive front. I think that they're going to be able to wreak a lot of havoc. I think that they're going to be able to create a lot of problems, I think, for opposing offensive lines going up against it. Now, when you look at this defense for Michigan, you certainly have a lot of depth, like I just said, and you want a lot of big guys up front of the defensive line, but you also need linebackers that can flow to the football. Well, I've got good news. Michigan has got 2 very good linebackers. They are returning their top 2 tacklers from last season in Ernest Hausman and Jayshawn Barham. I call them the young Big Ten All-Stars because in their younger days, of course, they had, I think it was just the one season for Ernest Hausman at Nebraska, but Jayshawn Barham, of course, had really good seasons over there at Maryland. You also have seniors Jimmy Rodler and Jaden Hood in there as well that can certainly provide some depth. I look at this front 7 as a whole, and this is a strength for Michigan football. You combine it with a very much improved offense, and you can see why Michigan is trending towards a 9-win season, maybe towards a 10-win season this year. Now, you look at the secondary, kind of like in the beginning and the middle of last year, Michigan's secondary was a little bit of an Achilles heel. It was a little bit of a question. And then now this year, you lose Will Johnson, you lose Makari Page, you lose Quentin Johnson, you lose a lot of guys that you've seen take a lot of snaps for Michigan over the years. Now, big returner is Rod Moore, a big-time leader back there at safety on the back end of this defense for the Wolverines. So they got to figure out those questions in the secondary, but overall, I really like what Michigan has coming back on the defensive side of the football. Now, the last of these S's is schedule, and it might be the most important of these S's because the scheduling disparity with bigger conferences in the Big Ten right now, there's going to be years where you have a really, really tough schedule, and you are going to fight, and you are going to claw to a 7-win season. But sometimes it's about getting that great draw, and I think the big reason why I believe that Michigan has it in them. I just laid out their personnel, and I think their personnel, right, is very good and much improved. I think even despite losing a lot of NFL players, I think overall as a team, they're going to be a better football team and play better football next season. But this schedule shapes out very, very well for the Wolverines. No Penn State, no Oregon, no Indiana, no Illinois, no Iowa. They avoid all of the great Big Ten teams outside, of course, their rival against Ohio State. Let's take a look at that schedule here just a little bit. I think a big swing game is going to be that early game on the road against Oklahoma. Hey, John Mateer, former Wazoo Cougar quarterback, transferring in there. I think Oklahoma will be an improved football team this year. But if you're able to get past that Oklahoma game, you got New Mexico and Central Michigan at home. You go on the road to Nebraska. I think Michigan's got a better roster than Nebraska, certainly right now. You've got Wisconsin at home. You know, if you're able to beat Oklahoma, this is looking like it could be a 5-0 start for the Wolverines. And then that USC game on the road, that could be a little bit tricky, certainly for the Wolverines. But then you look after that USC game, you look at home against Washington, at Michigan State, home against Purdue, at Northwestern, and at Maryland. Like, those last three were the bottom three teams in the Big Ten last season: Purdue, Northwestern, and Maryland before their matchup against Ohio State. I look up all and down this schedule. It's really, really difficult for me to look at this slate and say Michigan is going to win less than 9 games. A 10-2, and I think that considering this schedule, okay, maybe it's not totally like maybe what Indiana had last season, but considering this schedule, Michigan is probably going to have to win at least 10 games, maybe even 11 games to get into the college football playoff, and they're going to have to win convincingly, especially if some other teams have more difficult schedules and are in the conversation for next season. Strength, smash, schedules. Michigan has all the makings of a college football playoff return in 2025.